are back for the last session of the day of Can Diversity Collective's Inkwell Beach Live. We could not be in Cannes this year, but we are here all together having collective creative conversations. This is the last session of the day. And if you have not been with us all day long, let me tell you, we have had an amazing day, some great conversations. I'm almost exhausted, at least from the last conversation. It was so deep in terms of, you know, the intersectionality of what's happening with the LGBT community, but it's just some amazing insights. We definitely want to run that one again. We are here now with our last panel, How to Be Better Allies, and we have three amazing women. Carola Jane, who's a part of Spartan, our sponsor. So everybody snaps, wave at Carola. Thank you so much. I'm super excited about being here. We have Lauren Mala. I'm going to mispronounce the name. Laura Milan, who is an extraordinary CEO, investor, anything that you can think of. Lauren has done it. So welcome to the conversation. And we have Andrea Sullivan, who is with VaynerMedia, and we are super excited to have you here. I'm going to leave you ladies in the good hands of Laura, who has been doing an excellent job today moderating. But enjoy the conversation, enjoy the experience. Please share with us all of your knowledge on how to be better allies with each other. I think this is going to be a great session to close the day. I'll come back in at the end to shut us out completely, but let's hear some great info that you have for us.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you.
Hi, ladies. It is so lovely to hang out with you all. I know we should all be having a glass of wine because it is cocktail hour. So we'll virtually cheers. And actually, I think you guys were the last adults I saw before COVID hit. So it's actually really nice to see you all again. You know, it's always better just for you all to introduce yourselves. So I'm going to start with the lovely Carola. If you want to give us a little intro about who you are to the audience.
Hi, Carola Jane. I'm the CMO of Spartan, which is an extreme wellness company. We organize around 250 events across 48 different countries. And I had the great fortune to meet Laura and Adrian with relationship to Can, the diversity initiative. And we had activation planned for this summer. And I'm just thrilled to be here with both my friends, Lauren and Andrea, and obviously Laura and Adrian, and to be part of this very meaningful and much needed conversation.
Awesome. So glad to have you here, Carola. And Lauren, a fellow LM initials like me.
LM for the win. Thank you for thank you for having me. We go way far back, so I feel like having this conversation today is certainly timely and well overdue. But I'm so excited to be here. I am the CEO of Digital Undivided. We are the social startup that works to catalyze the genius of Black and Latinx women in spaces of innovation and entrepreneurship. I've been an entrepreneur for most all of my career, and I'm a brand builder and marketer to Fortune 500 brands, but it is an incredible time to be leading Digital Undivided and being able to be in the position to equip women with the resources and access that they need to win, especially right now. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. And last but not least, the wonderful Andrea Sullivan.
Oh, thank you, Laura. And thanks for reminding us about that incredible dinner. I feel like this is just an extended conversation and how we can get to work and doing some really important things together. So thanks for including me today. I'm Andrea Sullivan, the CMO of VaynerX, Gary Vaynerchuk's enterprise that it's a full service digital agency, everything from Snapchat to Super Bowl. And I've recently just stood up a new content series called Marketing for the Now, where we have been trying to help people coming up with practical ideas and views on some of the topics that we're even going to be touching on this evening, as well as a lot of other things. So really thrilled to be able to join arms with all of you women and talk about a really important thing today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea. And, I think, it is kind of funny to think about, back in March, we were all having dinner around a table together. And the idea of actually going to a dinner with a bunch of people who you haven't been quarantined with seems like the wildest thing you could do right now. Like, you're risking it all for dinner. So it's July 2020, and the world is even more different than it was on May 1st of 2020. How has the pandemic and the racial unrest affected your respective businesses? And I guess I'll start with you, Carola, because I know it's been an interesting time for Spartan.
Yeah. So our business has obviously been heavily impacted by the pandemic. We had to cancel or postpone most of our events. So all countries were obviously impacted. And, the team had to very quickly pivot. I think one of the most important things from the virus was definitely that people feel, obviously alone in their homes. They're not sure what's going to happen. And our mission is to have 100 million people active and moving. So what we decided to do is have a lot of free content and really leverage our community platform to get people, motivation, support, and also get them moving. On the social side, looking at the racial situation in our country, we very quickly felt that we should leverage our platform, to really stand with our community and to really support our community, to leverage the platform to give our community a voice. And, we very quickly decided that also, posting is one thing, but there needs to be more lasting change. So I think we have started with a very quick reaction to what's been happening and deciding that, we definitely want to be outspoken. We don't want to be silent. We want to really make sure that our community is inclusive, that our company is inclusive. But I think the real work starts now, like to really look at it internally. What are we doing to really create a very inclusive work culture? And, we've just done a few smaller things, such as added an extra vacation day that people can take, when they want to, either to protest, to vote, or for teens. And, we're looking at, we have an internal diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that meets once a week, where we review everything and, basically come up with suggestions. And then we have an external advisory committee where we've invited our communities, the OCR Latinos and the Black Spartans, to really look at what we're doing and, have a discussion. And I think, we have to admit where we're not doing enough. We have to admit where we can do better. And we're definitely continuously looking at what the next step forward is and how can we be the most inclusive platform possible and company.
Awesome. Great to hear. How about you, Lauren? Because you were started digital right as this was all blowing up. Wonderful timing, my darling. How has it been for you all?
So it's been interesting. And I've sat on the board of Digital Undivided for the last 2 years. So, and as you know, Laura, I've been connected to the organization since the very beginning. In 2011, even before we were an official public charity in 2012. So, part of what we do is to evolve and to support the evolution of women of color. And anyone who wants to be innovative has to be prepared to evolve and be fairly agile. This is certainly the test of all tests, like if anyone needed the School of Hard Knocks, we're all getting it right now. It was certainly an interesting time, though, to move from the board of directors to being CEO of the organization. I said yes to the appointment in May, and June 1st, I was leading and managing a very different organization than the one I had agreed to lead prior. And I think it is the most pivotal point in our work. And while the unrest and the reckoning it's hard, it's deep, it's painful, it's complicated, it's layered, everyone has a different, this time touches everyone in a different way. What I spent a lot of time saying, especially last week, as I was wrapping up, month one as CEO and writing my funder updates, was, as a leader, this has absolutely stretched me, because I am leading a team who is grappling with the same issues as the community who we seek to serve. And yet my team is coming to work every single day, giving me their best, wanting to finding their own joy in creating the solutions in conversations for our community, even though they are sitting and dealing with these injustices and the pandemic, and then the racial pandemic in their own way as well. And so it's been a really interesting time, but it has also been an eye-opening time. It's been a time where I think we've seen a lot more compassion, both internally and externally. We've certainly seen a lot of hatred as well, and a lot of things that cause us to have pause for great concern. But I think that just makes us be even more intentional in how we work, how we serve, how we equip, and knowing that mental health is so important right now for all of us, especially those of us who are moms, like I am, with Black children and a Black son, especially. I have a daughter as well. But making sure that our young Black men feel protected, just all of the layers. And so on the day of mourning, I did give the entire office off, and everyone appreciated that. But we are pushing ahead, and this has been a really wonderful time, Undivided, because unfortunately, the response times on certain key conversations with new potential partners, supporters, immediately collapsing, whether that's guilt, allyship, intention, impact. I'm open to all conversations, and I'm really open-minded in fostering those conversations as long as there's respect in doing so. So it's been an interesting time to also open new doors.
Awesome. And Andrea, how about you? I mean, obviously it's a huge agency with multiple offices all around the world. How has that been for you and the Vayner team?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look back and to think just after our dinner, what were the first days? What did they look like in the beginning of the pandemic? And I think we had to pivot very quickly as an industry, but in particular as a company, to figure out how are we going to serve our clients and get everyone to work from home and all that kind of thing. And we're able to do that, I think, much more efficiently and effectively than we thought, in part because of our culture. And it starts at the top with Gary in really having a lot of empathy, and trying to make sure that we're thinking about everyone and their well-being, and kind of picking up the slack wherever we go. I think the harder thing now is to help people in supporting the combination of what's going on in terms of the grief, the coming together. How do we start to really look at systemic change, not only inside of our own organization, and we've had to do a lot of pretty intense listening, I would say gulping a bit. We think of ourselves as being more enlightened, and yet we had to listen a lot, learn a lot, start to make change inside our organization, while at the same time trying to help our clients, the brand leaders, in figuring out, what am I supposed to be saying and doing and all the rest? Should I be silent? Should I, what is in this crisis of leadership? It's really important that we all are leaning in a way that we can make this systemic change and to not allow for these human injustices anymore. And so I would say the pandemic was one thing, and we certainly saw a tremendous acceleration in terms of change in business. We launched a new business around e-commerce and all those kind of things. But I think the more profound work is the work that we're really just beginning now, in trying to build an infrastructure that really supports the whole idea around allyship and understanding our own responsibility in that, our accountability, and knowing that we're going to have to join arms with each and every person, especially in a world where there's a lack of leadership at certain levels, and politically and in government. So many entities are having to lean in ways that they never have before, and that requires all of us to really understand our own roles in that, and to feel discomfort, and then to come out and to be open to that ongoing journey that we're all in the midst of.
Awesome. And digging a little bit deeper on that, Andrea, so obviously big advertising agency, and, has a distinct culture, and now you're thinking at this unique time where it's all about how to not just be inclusive, but to listen, learn, and then to act. And how have you all been able to begin to at least start to implement some of those strategies within your organization?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of allyship is something that is not new to Vayner. So we're 11 years old, and about 2.5 years ago, a number of different groups came out to say, hey, we want to form either Vayner Allies, Vayner Noir, different groups. And these community resource groups are about 100 people strong in an 800 person environment. And so the good news is that they were self-named, they were, self-formed, and, are sort of wired from the top down, up and across. I think that what we did need to do immediately was, listen really hard. There was a lot of pain there, and just make sure that we are continuing to have sessions, more than weekly, honestly. But start to really hardwire the changes back into our business plan, and looking at everything from how are we continuing to fund new students and increase the pipeline as an industry and take a leadership position in that? How are we changing up recruiting practices? How are we nurturing careers so that people feel they can see themselves and their flight? And even funding new innovative companies and things like that. It's, it requires a lot. And so I would say the foundational elements of being empathetic were, kind of there. There were some of the community resource groups, but I think the amount of listening, learning, and acting, and trying to do that all real time, there's a sense of speed that is necessary. And yet at the same time, I think it's super important that we're thinking about the systemic requirements of this, and that takes some time. It takes unraveling. It takes the feeling of discomfort, from leadership on down. And so I would say that this is, we're at the beginning.
Yeah, but it's great to see that you're at the beginning and doing it, because I think a lot of companies right now we're going to think about how to best implement. And I think that's the issue that's happening right now, where it's the time for thinking about it was long past.
That's right.
And now it's about action. And if you do screw up, like this was something that was brought up on a panel earlier today, that like the whole thing is to get moving. And yeah, you're going to screw up along the way, but the key is to get moving. Right. And for you, Carola, how has it been for you all? Because obviously, again, you got shocked with okay, we can't do outdoor races. And now we have this issue where it's affecting, up and down our communities, and at our heart, community is what drives Spartan. How's it been for you all?
Yeah, the good thing, like you said, community is really at the core of Spartan. And I think the one thing, even before I joined, that Joe DeSena, the founder, has always done, he's given his email to everybody in the community. He's always open to listen and hear and get on the phone. And I think, we're exactly the same approach right now, that we're basically trying to really listen to our community internally and externally. And I think we've probably been better externally to listen than internally. And I think that was a big change, to really get on the leadership team and really speak with everyone and say, okay, we really need to have sustained change going forward. We need to have these discussions much more often. It's not a one-time event. We need to look at everything that we're doing across the company. And, same as Andrea, as he said, we obviously want to create a lot of equal opportunity. We also have to look at our pro team and, how do we have more diverse recruitment practices? Like, who do we recruit? How do we find people? Because so far it's such a young organization. Everything has just grown organically. So we really have to be much more conscious. And I think Lauren and I had a conversation this weekend. It's really about just also being able to say, I don't have the answer. And actually, I'm sorry, I might have messed up, or, we might not have acted fast enough. And I think I really learned that going out and saying, we weren't prepared for something and we didn't have our act together is also sometimes the right answer, right? Versus just being silent. So I think from our perspective, we were obviously, our team is incredibly passionate. Everybody, obviously wants to make statements and be supportive and really, move the organization into the most inclusive place. But sometimes we also felt like, we don't want to do the wrong thing. And I think that's where we need to just go out there and say, here's what we're trying to do. And that's what we want our community and our team really to be involved, that the perspective has to be as diverse as possible, because not one person does have the solution, right? And it's really in the dialogue that I think we may join change going forward.
Absolutely. I think that's where you have to go. You've got to have the dialogue. And look, there's no magic wand where like, oh, I've solved all racial diversity issues. But taking a step forward is going to be the key going forward. So, Lauren, I'm sure it's been interesting for you because your organization works tirelessly for Black women founders as well as Latinx and Indigenous. And I know it's happened with our company. It's probably happened to you all. You get a lot of phone calls recently because now everybody wants to talk to you after years of working really hard. Like all of a sudden, hi, you know my phone number. How's the pandemic affected you all in that way, where folks now realize that the importance of the work that you do?
Well, per usual, you hit the nail on the head. So not only have we been really busy at Digital Undivided with a lot of inbound, whether that's donations, inquiries, partnerships, sponsorships, and even with those, I'm being really intentional about who do we want to partner with? What have you said or done in the past? Do you take the long view? Do you have good intentions? Is there integrity behind your work? It's not just, oh, great, we want your check. It's much more than that for me as a leader. And it's also about finding ways to address some of the systemic problems that are perpetuated by tech and innovation and the ecosystem at large, simply because of the way that it's been designed and how power has been imbalanced and distributed. And so it's absolutely been a really interesting time to feel as though, while we've always known as Black women that we have power, to feel as though, we now have the power to be heard feels good. And I know it feels good for the team. That idea is, frustrating, yes, but these are ideas and initiatives that we've been working on for years. We've been listening for years. We've been creating the Project Diane research report for years. We've identified the problem. We were one of the first to identify the problem before we had all these other, startups and organizations that are looking at diversity and technology, diversity in the digital space, in startups and venture, what have you. So it's been very busy. And again, a really good opportunity to take checks and balances and see, well, who do we want to work with? And not just your capital. Yes, we'll take it. Thank you. We need the donations and the support in that way, but also help me fight this battle in more meaningful ways. And, that means pipeline partnerships. That means mentorship through their organization to come mentor our cohorts of START or our incubator program, BIG. That means coming in and speaking to our community. That means sharing your insights and your experience. That means opening up for potential jobs. There is a larger conversation to be had. And so while this might be the catalyst for that conversation, I take every conversation that I have the opportunity to have right now as deep as I possibly can, because I also recognize these conversations might not be sustained, unfortunately. We'll see, right? TBD. But I've also been inundated with calls just personally because of marketing, branding, communications. What do we say? What do we do? So it has been an incredibly busy time. And the people who reach out and are more thoughtful are the ones that we put higher on the list of priority.
Awesome. And that kind of goes into my next question about what's kind of performative allyship versus real allyship, and where that and the line between the two. Because I think a lot of folks, well, I put a black square on Instagram. Wasn't that awesome? And we know that you're doing that because you think that's what you need to be doing versus actually doing the nitty-gritty true work. So for you all, what does it actually mean to be an ally? I'll start with you, Perla.
I think at Spartan, there's kind of a saying that you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And I think being an ally, it's not about you. It's about supporting, and it's about having, the voice that can talk to my white colleagues, my white friends, and really being there to listen, to broaden the team that can have a voice, to elevate people that have different backgrounds and different perspectives, but then also to have the tough conversations when you need to have them, from my perspective. So I think it's incredibly important that, like you said, we were probably more hesitant to do something because we didn't want to just put a post and then walk away, right? Like, it's really addressing that it is harder than just paying lip service, but you really need to go deep. And I think going deep, sometimes, like I said before, also means that you need to acknowledge that you might not have the answers and that there is not one answer, but it's more a group that needs to come together, and it might take time and it might be painful, and that, there is a lot that needs to be discussed. So from my perspective, I think the best I can do is constantly educate myself and give the team also time to educate themselves at Spartan, right? So that there's enough time to really listen and learn and not just try to march and make a quick decision and move forward. Which, oftentimes when you're in an organization that has just completely changed its revenue model is also painful, right? So, but I think, that's what is required. And it's required when you have a leadership role, that you raise your voice and you say, no, it's not a marketing campaign. This is very important. Everybody needs to be behind this. And we really need to discuss, what our next steps are and how we're moving forward.
Absolutely. And making those choices when you have to.
Yes.
And for you, Lauren, what do you think? When as a Black woman founder who, and businesswoman, obviously your universe is going to be slightly different. When you say ally, what does it mean to you?
It means someone who has good intention, is brave and fearless in their ability to ask tough questions. But I think we've spent a lot of time in general talking about, asking the tough questions. And I want to spend more time talking about receiving the tough answers, because that's where I think it gets difficult for people. That is the point of uncomfortableness, is, oh, wait, I've asked this question, but now you've told me an answer, like a real answer, right? People are expecting this fluff answer. And I have some tactical, easy ways that anybody could, do something positive and show allyship. But again, we have to look a little deeper than that into, do you really want to be an ally? Like, is this a genuine stance that someone is taking? Because I also don't want to tell people how they can be an ally if they are not sincere in their intention to do so. Because what I fear most is that we have ally imposters, right? Like, there is going to be an imposter syndrome here as well. And I've been saying this for a month, where we will see who really wanted to make long-term change at all cost and who wanted to do it because everybody else was doing it and they didn't know what to do. So for me, being an ally means committing to do the work, no matter how uncomfortable, no matter how difficult, and also committing to hearing and learning from a variety of perspectives, because what we're also getting are people going online and researching history and like, oh, no, this is history. But as you know, I'm sure, Laura, you've also got Black people saying, excuse me, let's talk more about Tulsa. Excuse me, why weren't we taught Juneteenth? Excuse me, why do we, honor one holiday differently than we honor another? Why, so it's unrooting, I think, a lot of other conversations, even in Black households, right? So that's what allyship means to me. It means being brave, curious, committed, and courageous, and being able to really step up. And also, most importantly, to use the privilege that someone has in their allyship to advance the agenda of someone who does not look like them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's key. It's that, like, look, everyone's got a degree of privilege to some way, shape, or form. And if you have a choice, you can either use that to help others or you can use it for yourself. And in this moment, those who use it for themselves are getting called out, which is why we are having this conversation around cancel culture, what have you. But those who see who they are and go, actually, I can get in the rooms that you can't, let me help. And that's how I think, you can really be a true ally. And Andrea, how about you?
Yeah, I think what Lauren mentioned in terms of having these different layers and how can we start to actually use allyship to bring people together is really important. But I think that we as allies can't declare ourselves as allies. The work has to happen each and every day. Others get to decide. If I'm a person of privilege, I need to make sure that I'm giving those that perhaps don't have a voice or haven't had a voice in the loud places that they need to, that I'm extending that, and that I'm also representing change in rooms where perhaps there aren't the same minority groups that are that should be at the table. That I take action against that, and I do the hard work each and every day. And I think that, you know, in some ways, if you look at even the spirit of Gandhi, that you want to be the change that all of us wish to see in the world, and that requires a constant discomfort and constant sort of reevaluation of where we are, and even our own personal roles, and perhaps misunderstanding things that are going on, and holding ourselves accountable for identifying different ways of dismantling things and putting them back together in different ways. I'm just reading the book White Fragility, and it's hard to read that. I consider myself a white progressive, and this book is suggesting that we're actually a big part of the problem, because we think that we understand what's going on and that our intentions are in the right place, but frankly, it isn't enough. And so we have to do a lot more to peel back the onion and to really step up. And I think there's this, again, I think that we're all at the beginning of this. And I think even the definition of allyship was something that felt comfortable and nice, and it was a, kind of a warm and fuzzy term. And now it's really being defined in the way that it was intended.
Yeah, I think it's at this point, it's, the intention is ally means that you are okay with getting dirty too. Because previously it was, I can write a check. And provided I do that, I give to the NAACP. And we're now at a point where it's like, well, actually, are you talking to your internal corporate culture saying, why is it the only Black people who work here are in reception? Mm-hmm. And what comes with that? Because that's the thing whereby you are really calling out the structures and the systems that have been in place that have made it so difficult for Black people for so long.
That's right, absolutely. And I think that, it's whole industries, it's, across borders, it's all of it. And, I think I'd love to continue to have these conversations. I'm hoping that this week that you've just created is something that's so important and powerful. Let's hope that this is the beginning of something, and that if we're gathering, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, that we're seeing even more commitment to change and a lot of progress.
Well, that's going to be the key thing. And, it's interesting because I think, you all are working moms. And so you also have multiple levels of this, because not only do you have to walk the walk when, you're at the office, but then when you come home to your kids. And I'm sure it's been unusual and challenging, and a lot of tough conversations have had to be had with your kids. And so how's that been for you, sort of navigating that climate, separate of the fact that you all became school teachers and are very good at math all of a sudden. But this current climate, how's it been navigating that universe as well?
I'll just, if it's okay, I want to jump in on one thing about allyship and what I think actually makes a great ally as well, really quickly, because it came to mind as Andrea was speaking, is that in life, for everyone, when you have worked to get to a certain point in your career, that certain doors open easier, certain transactions happen quicker, that, you've kind of finally reached your own place of privilege, right, in many ways. That, to me, allyship is seeing someone who is not of color use their privilege and their power to put themselves on the line to create equality for someone else who they know is not getting an equal chance, paycheck, opportunity, consideration, what have you. And what I think we don't see enough of, and where I really see allyship, is when someone theoretically puts their neck out there a little further for you because they recognize just how privileged they are, versus saying, oh, wait, I have privilege And yeah, you're accomplished and you have your own privilege perhaps, right? Because I will be one of the first to admit that even as a Black woman, I have some privilege too, right? But I use my privilege all the time for women of color to make sure, because I know that that's my power, that I can say something, I can push the envelope a little more than someone else might be able to, and I'll still keep my seat at the table, right? So to me, that is also what an ally is. It's saying, I recognize that I have privilege, and I recognize that it's going to take a lot for me to lose it, and me sticking my neck out there and being adamant about advocating for you, for opportunities, or for equality is the right thing to do, and I'm going to do it even though, and I'm going to do it because I have that privilege. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Love that.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's again, it's that risk tolerance. Like when if you're a true ally, how far are you willing to go? Because no, writing a check is really like the baseline thing you can do. But when you are sticking your neck out and knowing that you might, get your hand slapped, you might get punched in the face, but you do it anyway because you know that even if you did get punched in the face, it's not going to hurt nearly as much as it would if it was somebody else.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to the idea around how do you talk to your kids? Because, obviously they're in school, well, kind of, and they have to interact and they're seeing what's happening right now. We're all in different parts of New York and like, what's that been like for you on sort of navigating that role as working moms in this climate?
Maybe I start. So I think from my perspective, my husband is Indian, and I've oftentimes assumed to, something that I know about racism, and he just always has said, you have absolutely no idea. Like, look at yourself, like you just don't know what you're talking about. So I feel like I've grown up in the last 20 years just kind of hearing his perspective, and my kids are obviously, mixed, and I think also having grown up in Germany, there's a lot that people didn't speak up for. So I think I'm going like probably the more confrontational approach where I show the kids everything. And I just say, look, I am married to, my husband, and I think I understand what's going on. And he's telling me you have no idea. So I want you to grow up like basically having an idea, right? And you can only have an idea if you're watching, listening, talking. Like you have to get in the game, you have to confront it, you have to talk about it. And I think the only thing that's just really, obviously surprising to me is not surprising, but I think the kids, they think it's so unjust, and they obviously want everybody to act, and they're saying, what are you doing? So I think that's the hard part, that you don't have a solution as a parent, right? Where you normally try to fix it, and just the deep questions that a kid will ask you can really, obviously, it's very difficult to answer. And you just say, yeah, that there is no answer right now. And I will work, and we will all work on making an answer and on, creating justice and all of that. So from my perspective, what am I doing? I'm just really addressing it. We're talking about everything openly. We're trying to broaden the conversation, bring more people into the conversation, and, not really sugarcoat anything, because I feel like I don't want them to grow up ignorant, right? I want them to grow up in this world and really know what their problems are, and then be part of the change going forward.
Awesome. Andrea, what about you?
Yeah, so I have 2 teenagers, and my son is going on 20. He did bring his girlfriend home during quarantine as well. Native American, lovely. I've gotten to know her quite well. Didn't know her very much at all before. My daughter is 17. And I think, it's interesting to see how roles are changing during this period of our lives, and that our kids are pretty well informed. And yet, to Carolla's point, the kinds of questions that are asked that we can't answer in a way that seems sufficient is, it's the type of thing that I personally have a hard time living with it. The whole idea that we're having the same conversations now that that we did, when they were young, or, before that is, it's despicable. I do remember a time when my son came home from school at 7 and I said, how was class today? And he said, well, the teacher talked about something that I'm not sure if she really knows what she was talking about. And I said, well, what was that? he said, well, there was this time, apparently, she said, where people treated one another differently based on their skin. And we were living in the city and in the village where, you know, there was much more diversity than there is where we are in Westchester. And it was interesting because I said, well, that still happens today. What do you mean? He said, yeah, there's, you know, she talked about this thing called racism, but I can't believe that would actually be the case. And so it was interesting for me to just sort of see that kids are, you know, they're brought up in their own context, and, you know, what they see and what they experience, you know, can be very different. And I think the hardest thing for me is to hear the kinds of conversations that that my friends that are Black have to have with their children at very young ages. I'll hand it over to you, Lauren.
Well, that, I mean, these are the toughest conversations I've ever had in my life, ever. Forget as a parent, ever. And it's very complicated for me because I grew up in New York City. I grew up on the Upper East Side. There was no diversity when I was growing up. I went to an all-white school. I was the only kid of color in my entire grade from nursery school until 8th grade. My mom created the mentoring program at Dalton, which is where I went. Now it's one of the more diverse places that you could go to school in the city in terms of independent education. So I feel as though, you know, and I grew up with parents who had their stories. I grew up with parents who rode the back of the bus. My father drank out of a different water fountain for colored boys, for Negroes, like, and hearing those stories when I was a kid and being raised, quite frankly, in my own privilege as well. And I always say that the privilege that I was afforded as a child, even to go to independent school and have a great upbringing, was because I was an only child. And I always say jokingly, but seriously, if I had 3 or 4 siblings, I know I would have lived a very, you know, been brought up in a very different way, and probably not, certainly in New York City. So I find myself, you know, having just having constant recollection of the conversations that my parents had with me, of trying to illustrate how bad and how difficult something was and how much they had to overcome in order for me to have what I have today. But yet, and still, I'm having those conversations with my children. And when I speak to my grandmother, and my children are the only great grandchildren of both sides of the family, my grandparents are still alive and 90 years old. And to talk to my grandma, who has lived through everything. I mean, segregation, racism, boycotts, Rodney King riots in LA, like, you name it. And when she's speechless, and she's the matriarch of the family, you're speechless, right? Like, she's the one who has all the answers. And she's shocked, and she's heartbroken, and my dad, like, tears, can't take it. So it's really hard. It's incredibly tough. And you want your children to grow up feeling confident and to some extent carefree, but still aware and woke and smart, and certainly not ignorant in any way, to Carolla's point. But you also don't want to scare them. But you also realize that sometimes if you raise your children, and the goal of every parent is to give your child a better life than you had yourself, no matter where you are in life. That's all, I think, every good parent's, you know, primary goal. And, you know, finding ways to make sure that my children's eyes are wide open to even just hatred, to microaggressions, to feeling comfortable and confident with what to do, how to respond, when to share, how to de-escalate situations, especially for my son, is incredibly scary. We've been running a lot recently, and he is a crazy fast runner. He runs cross country for his school. We've been doing 2 miles together, and he can do 2 miles in 11 minutes and some change, and I take like 14 minutes. And the other day he ran ahead, and he did not stop to look back, and I freaked out, and I got very upset. And ultimately he made his way home, but I was like, hey, you're supposed to look back for me. It was an innocent, oh, I'm sorry, Mom. And he's, you know, Corolla and I, our sons have grown up together. He's 12. But we went for a run again this weekend, and my son demanded that we come home because we were running at 12 noon, and there had been a shooting as we were entering the park at 11:30, and the killer was still out loose. And as you know, there's like firecrackers going on everywhere. I think it's all across the country. But, you know, as we're running through the park in broad daylight, I just asked because I see the commotion ahead. So I was like, okay, hold mommy's hand. And he's like, but he's cooperating with me. And I asked one of the doormen what happened before we crossed the street. And I was hoping that that was not what had happened. But it is scary as a Black mother to know that, at least for my Black son, explaining it, putting him in front of the TV and asking him to watch news clips of Trayvon Martin and, Ahmaud Arbery and other young Black boys to get him to understand why running ahead of mommy isn't okay, or how that simple run could be misconstrued as something else and end up in a way that no one would want to end up. Those are really hard. Like, nobody can equip you to have those conversations. And so in many ways, it's very twisted. I'm grateful for what happened this weekend because it scared the crap out of my kid and woke him up. Like, he's woke. He's woke now. But it is heartbreaking that it took that for him to take what I've been saying and what we've been saying to him as seriously as I think he needs to take it. I can guarantee you he will never run ahead of me again.
Well, I mean, we're at this really, difficult moment. Like, we started today's conversation by viewing The Talk from P&G, where that was the very first commercial that won a Grand Prix Cannes Lion, but also put the conversations that every Black person has had, either with their parents or as a parent to their kid, about the world that we live in. And it encapsulated the fact that, this is a scary place for Black people. And it doesn't matter how privileged you may be, how awesome all your white friends might be. It takes one really unusual, random day, kind of like the Chris Cooper situation with Amy Cooper, happened on Memorial Day, for that all to change. And so as we look towards, being better allies, how do we help I guess this is more for Andrea and Carol, as white women, like, how are you all sort of saying to your other white female friends, like, hey, here's how you guys have got to get this together, because we can't go back to the way it used to be.
Yeah, maybe I'll start from my perspective, and Lauren and I talked about it yesterday. It's not like something that's going to pass. It's not something that, you compartmentalize and you put it there and then you deal with it and then you go on to the rest of your day. I think it's not like an inconvenience, right? Because now all of a sudden you have to deal with this and you have to talk with your kids. I think it just has to be the building block of you, like who you are, how you address situations, how you want to be an active member of your company, your family, your friends, right? You just have to be that ally, and you have to, I think, stand up and, like we said, have uncomfortable conversations when they arise, and always be that person that is just known to have a position that they'll make known everywhere they go. And I think for me, the biggest fear is that it's definitely uncomfortable because there's a lot of change in the world, and that people will go back into their shell because they feel like, I can't make the change, right? Like, I won't be able to have that impact. But I think like the whole conversation that we've just had around allyship, it's all everybody, like it's all the little parts that come together that create a different world and have a change, right? So if you just think, me, myself, I'm too small and too insignificant to have a change, you'll really underestimate and, don't leverage the position that you have. So I think, really standing up for what you believe in and supporting and pushing forward constantly. And I think it's as a person, not necessarily just corporate or just with kids or just in your friends. It's all encompassing.
Awesome.
Yeah, and what I would say is that, that's what we're learning now, is that we have to bring all of these ecosystems together, and that it is very complicated and it's hard, but we can't not do it. And that we can't stand ourselves if we don't start to make change. And to Lauren's point, the whole idea that to be an ally means that you have to give up something, and that it might feel like it's, create some kind of discomfort or even some pain or something, but it can't possibly be anything close to what Lauren and her family feels versus how I felt it. And so I have an obligation to make sure that the leaders that I'm surrounded by, who right now they're having a crisis of confidence in terms of their ability to communicate and lead and behave sometimes. Some of our clients are seeking help in trying to figure out, how do you break that down? How do you, how do you make change, but at the same time keep your job and make sure you're protecting companies and brands and leaders and all these kind of things. And the truth of the matter is, everything has, needs to change. And so we need to be able to be loud about our commitment to that. We need to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and we're measuring things that we've never measured and kind of breaking that down into actionable steps. And we can't give up.
It's so very true. So, I think you think about where we are. Okay, it's now July 2020. Where do you think we'll be in July 2021?
Well, I don't know where exactly we'll be, but Andrea just made a comment that I want to also touch on quickly, which is people are trying to keep their jobs and still make change. And I think that if people start figuring out that making the change will allow them to keep their jobs, we'll be in a better place. There's a lot of consternation around, well, what do I do? What do I say? How do I show up? And a lot of those people are losing their jobs because they're getting called out, or other things are bubbling to the surface, or people are taking matters into their own hands, a la, anonymous letters and change.org petitions calling for the removal of certain people in power within companies and corporations. And so I could sit here and give a whole speech about the Black buying power, the Black consumer, the loyalty of the Black customer, the high rates of recurring purchases. That doesn't matter because those are not our selling points. Our selling points are our culture, our uniqueness, our empathy, our diversity of perspective, of thought, of all these other things. And when people begin to embrace that, I think it's good for business. I think people then keep their jobs. I think more doors open. I think a lot of things change. But for too long, the betterment of Black people has not been baked into job retention. It has not been baked into corporate policy or corporate culture. And it has been all forgotten. And now people say, okay, I want to do this, but what does it do to our bottom line? But I kind of beg companies and brands specifically to look at what happens if you do nothing or you don't do enough, or what happens if you move too slowly and then all of a sudden you lose market share because the, buy Black, all Black everything, Black owned everything, like these movements are powerful. My Black receipt, there's just a lot happening right now to highlight and make it even easier for people to find Black owned businesses, Black owned products. And that is when other corporations and brands will see and really truly feel the power of not embracing the Black customer. And I really hope that allyship does not come because people see the power of the Black customer, because that's been preached about for years. But now they get to feel it in a different way.
Yeah, it goes from being yes, but I want to put the Black corner over here as to yes, and, because this makes much more sense for us to do this together. Let's see, and Carola, what do you think for 2020, 2021? What do you think will be?
I would hope that, like looking at where we are right now we were supposed to be in Cannes, I would hope that we're not in Cannes with a few very glitzy case studies and great videos that, leverage faces and show diversity. I think what Andrea said around measuring, I would hope that there are ways to really measure impact rather than have glossy case studies, In the end of the day, I think it is not so much, and that was a conversation I had with Lauren, it's not so much the marketing to people, it's more the creating real chance and equal opportunity for people in companies, and I think that needs to be the diversity, not just what we portray to the marketplace and who we target, but how we all come together and how we create a better working environment and more just kind of place to work for everyone, and through that bring everybody together. So I feel like, the proof point would be, next year in Cannes, at the Cannes Diversity Initiative, are we looking at a bunch of glossy case studies, or are we actually looking at real change? And, what does the group look like that shows up? Who is there, and which company has put really their money where their mouth is?
And Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I just would echo, what Carola said, that I think that, we need it becomes both a personal as well as a professional opportunity to make change. And, I think it's got to happen at the most senior levels. And unless we are tracking accountability and continuing to expose those that are not making progress, I think that, we're not going to get to where we need to be in making systemic change.
Awesome. Well, ladies, it was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. Some wonderful comments are happening in the chat. And I will turn it over to my esteemed host, Adrienne, to close us out for the day one.
Yeah, you guys, that was amazing. Carola, Andrea, and Lauren, some really great conversation. You really just kind of stoked some thoughts in my own mind about sort of, the journey. And you guys talked about the talk and the effects that it might have. Lauren, and the talk that she has with her son is very different from the talk that you, Andrea, and Carola have with your son. And during this COVID pandemic and this endemic of this racial situation that's happening, I had an opportunity to do one of the protests. And while I was watching the protest, I saw a white family standing on the corner. And they had a little one in a carriage and maybe about a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they were all holding up signs. And the little girl's sign had, like, we must do better. I must do better. And I was thinking, you're 6, like, what have you done that you feel like you must do better? The baby, you couldn't read her scribble, but she had like a beautiful heart. So you knew, she was even listening to what the conversations were. And the son had like a long manifesto of, Black Lives Matter, we must do better, and we have to commit to change. And I thought to myself, wow, and I call them like affectionately the white family, if you will. But this family has actually had the talk with their children, right? And that talk was, this is what this is the community or a culture that should be different, and you have to participate and show up differently. You have to learn how to love and respect people. And I think all of my white family friends, having conversations like that with your children, having that talk will definitely help to create and build a stronger and better loving human culture. And as you guys talked about allyship, one of my great friends, Dante Quick, who's a reverend in California, shared this, and I'll leave this with you guys as we wrap up, a quote from Sylvia Wagloda, who was the founding executive director of the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust. And it was this: there are 3 types of people involved in every atrocity. There's the perpetrator, the victim, and the bystander. And the worst is the bystander, for they further victimize the victim with their silence while simultaneously giving permission to the perpetrator. And, as we watched everything unfold in Minneapolis, and we saw those 3 cops be bystanders to the cop that killed George Floyd, we all, as a global community, became bystanders to that bystanding. And we all had to take a step and think about, how will we now be different? How will we be accountable? How will we be better allies? How will we look at being a bystander differently and take different actions about how we can be accountable and support our communities in need. And I want to say thank you to all of you ladies for being a different type of bystander who are committed to supporting underrepresented groups, and supporting women, supporting people of color, supporting your own families, and teaching them differently to do different and grow up to enhance and build a better culture. So thank you again, ladies, for participating. To everyone that's been listening today, we have a full set of programming tomorrow and the rest of the week. So many great surprises coming up. Tomorrow it's Tech Tuesday. So we have some of the greatest minds in technology that will be with us tomorrow. So I hope you'll check out the schedule and join us again. I guess this is it. This wraps up the day. This conversation with you beautiful ladies has made my day. Thank you, Laura, for being a great host. And ladies, I do have my courageous conversation wide. So cheers to you. And Spartan, thank you for the support and making this an amazing event. We hope we're making you guys proud with the conversations, and we look forward to seeing you guys back here tomorrow. So enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Our motto: don't talk about it, be about it. That's what we say. Just take action and let's get it done. All right. Bye, guys.